This is Catherine Dubberly, the Answer Lady, having a ball on my Kiss loom, making double comfort slippers. You can make some too. Let's get going.
We start by E-wrapping all of the pegs that we've decided to use. So I'm set up for a slipper for myself using 36 pegs. You may know that the E-wrap is not the prettiest cast on, and it's normally not my favorite, but in this particular case we're going to make use of the fact that it's not a tight cast on. Eventually this cast on is going to, oops, I almost wrapped a peg that didn't need to be wrapped, that's all that was. Eventually this cast on is going to end up on the inside of the ankle area. So we won't have to look at it, but we will have to slide the foot all the way through it in order to get the slipper on and off. So we need it to be stretchy and non-restrictive. And that's why the E-wrap is perfect. And the fact that it's not pretty is not going to be an issue because we won't be looking at it. As soon as we're finished E-wrapping, we will begin U-wrapping. And we're going to U-wrap and knit over with plain stockinette stitch for almost all of the slipper. What you want to do is knit a 7-inch length for this first section after the cast on. Since my row gauge is 6 rows per inch, that means I need to knit 6 times 7, which is 42. If your row gauge is a different number, say 5 rows per inch, you would knit 5 times 7, which is only 35. Or if it's like 6.3 rows, that can happen too. Just use your calculator, multiply it times 7, and knit that number of rows. And in that way, we can get a perfect 7 inches rather than a guesstimate of 7 inches. Once you've decided on a number of rows, go ahead and write it down because you want the other slipper to match this one, even more than you want it to be 7 inches long. So find out the number, record it, and we will knit both slipper tops this way. We're ready to do the first heel. Because everything is doubled on this slipper, there are 2 of everything. 2 sock tops, 2 heels, 2 foot lengths, and 2 toes. And then part of it is stuffed inside the rest of it. There's a seam right about there on the inside. I'm sorry I can't flip this inside out for you because I will mess up my wet tread paint. But we knitted first 7 inches, and then at the very end, after the final heel, we knit 1 inch, which is 8 inches of knitting. But because of this thick turn of cloth, is what it's called in the garment industry, this fold is thick because of the nature of the fabric. So we're only going to get about 3.5 inches of boot top above the heel, using 7 inches plus 1 inch is 8 total inches of cuff. And I wanted that seam hidden inside, which is why we didn't do it in even amounts. Could have done 4 inches and 4 inches, but then we would have a seam right up here, and I think this looks nicer and feels more comfortable. Now, you can make it taller. I would suggest that if you're a tall person, you may want it about 1 inch taller, which would mean knitting 9 inches where I have knitted 7 for a more average height of person. And then we'll still knit our 1 inch at the very end. And 9 inches plus 1 would give you 10 inches, and divided by 2, you'd expect 5 inches, but you're only going to get about 4.5 inches of cuff here. I do not recommend going a lot taller than that, because as we come up this direction, we're coming up the calf of the leg, and most of our calves flare, and there isn't any flare built into this design. So there's an upper logical limit to the length that you can go and have this plan work. But you can extend it another inch or 2 without any problem. The other issue is getting your foot in will become harder, but this isn't very tight, so I think that won't be a problem. However, I am not a tall person, and I'm happy with my 3.5-inch cuffs, and these are for me, so I've knitted 7 inches. And you could just, if you're not certain of your row gauge when you start, you can use this as your row gauge calculator. Go ahead and knit 7 inches by the ruler, and then you'll have a nice long piece of knitting to check and count stitches per inch, but I already know that mine is 6 stitches per inch. You will need to know your stitch row per inch. Sorry, I said stitches, and you need to know that too already, but you do need to know your exact row gauge to get your foot correct. But now we're ready to do the heel.